Hello SGD Sacred Geometry Decoded. I've got some stuff for you, some really important stuff. Follow on from the last one. And for instance, the height to the half base of the Great Pyramid on the northwestern face is ratio of 1 to 1.273 height. Okay, now 1, if 1 is the Earth, therefore the remainder is 27.3%, which is the size of the Moon in relation to the size of the Earth. So the last was a focus on 109.2, but I did mention this 27.3 or 273, the importance of that particular number. So we'll just, okay, for instance, this 109.2 in Jure's pentagram, 109.2 divided by 4, 27.3 as an angle, but this is a very important number. I'm giving you gold here. I'm giving you Easter eggs. And how this connects to Sun, Earth, and Moon, all is number. You want to know a secret? I'll tell you some bloody secrets. All right. So the Grand Gallery in the Great Pyramid. On this particular 100, so you have the base at the bottom, 156.81 feet. Very close to pi over 2 times 100. We'll get to that, but the top part of it is there are other surveys which would say it's 153.14 feet. Times that length, 153.14 feet, times pi is the height of the Great Pyramid. But the height of the Grand Gallery, 28 feet. Again, other surveys would say it's a slight bit over being exactly 28 feet high, but for the moment, let's use these numbers. 28 feet high and 153 feet long along the ceiling. 153, square root of 153 is 12.369. It's a number of full moons or synodic months per year. 12.369 plus 1 equals the number of sidereal months per year, which is 27.3 days. 27.3. This is all going to be about 273. So 153 divided by 128. So the height of the Grand Gallery in regards to the ceiling gives us a ratio of 5.464, etc. 1 to 5.464, etc. Now, the midpoint of a Grand Gallery, as other people have pointed out, is 29.9792458 degrees north. What's the light speed in meters per second? Okay, meters and seconds. Meter, the foot, the cubit. There is so much information here. Measurable, tangible, repeatable information. As above, so below. What's on the inside is what's on the outside. Geometry, arithmetic, astronomy, and music is embedded in not in just the pyramids, not just the Great Pyramid, not just in the pyramids, but in these ancient structures, up to the great cathedrals, including buildings such as the US Capitol building and Eiffel Tower, the Louvre Pyramid, and others. There are those who know, and they work in the tradition of Hermes, in the tradition of Thoth, in the tradition of Nuar and Fuzi. Geometry, astronomy, music, and arithmetic embedded in weights and measures. What can be weighed, what can be measured. In regards to 273, there's so much, but okay, I'm going to keep this one quick. So, therefore, the midpoint of a Grand Gallery, which is, as you know, interestingly, is one of the aspects which points to 299792458 meters per second. Anyway, so the height is 1 to 2.73 to 142.857, 142.857. Okay, that's a curiosity, but the socle, the paving stones underneath the Great Pyramid, which are so important in regards to the scaling. Okay, that is an eye. Yes, that is an eye. Vital to the scaling of a Great Pyramid to the size of the Earth at 1 to 86,400. Forget this 432 stuff. It describes a half globe, 86,400 as in seconds per day, meters, pendulums, cubits, all links together. This is the stuff. Okay, this is eventually we're going to get around to it. But anyway, the height of the socle is somewhere around 55 centimeters, which is 0.02734 chain, or links, because 100 links per chain. Which brings us back to Edmund Gunter and Queen Elizabeth I, Francis Bacon, Shakespeare, and all this very Hermetic period. Edmund Gunter, in air quotes, invented the Gunter's chain of 66 feet. 66 feet, or 100 links. 792. Okay, it's just anyway. Edmund Gunter, now 10 chain is 1 furlong. Why is 1 furlong important? Well, let's go to the King James Version of the Bible. Previous to the King James Version, they describe New Jerusalem in stadia, as where the King James Version described the measuring rod in furlongs, which is 660 feet. Okay, now it just so happens that at 12,000 furlongs is 792,000 feet. Oh my God, 528. Oh, well, okay, exactly 1,500 miles, rods, leagues, and this number just so happens to convert precisely to the modern meter, which is based on the speed of light per second, and we have exactly in there. Now, on its own, coincidence? Okay, cool. But let's keep going. The Great Pyramid, Baalbek or Heliopolis in Egypt, the Kaaba in Mecca, New Jerusalem and the Temple Mount and the Temple of the Golden Dome there in Jerusalem. All right. So back to the Holy City, meters, cubits. Now, it just so happens that a furlong is 440 cubits on the imperial scale. 440 cubits, that's New Jerusalem. All right, cool. Book of Enoch. Measure, measure, measure. The truth shall set you free. The measure of an angel. The measure of man is the measure of an angel. These shall bring the measures of the righteous. Enoch, as in Metatron, as in which leads to Hermes Trismegistus and Pythagoras and the masters of the Philosopher's Stone, which has to do with alchemy. And that's just one aspect of it. Okay, so just so happens that the base of the Great Pyramid, 440 Egyptian royal cubits. Okay, I've covered that one anyway. There's more info in there, but in the previous episode I mentioned the distance from this corner of the pyramid to Heliopolis is 25,920 yards, as in the number of years in precession. That same distance to the very center of the Temple Mount or the Golden Dome is 440 kilometers, 440, and 61.8 degrees. Now that's very, very close to a phi number, but is it 61.8 degrees is 1.08 radian. 1.08 radian. Okay, cool. They're just interesting, you know. It's meters, seconds, cubits. It's all coincidence. All nothing to be seen here. Well, for instance, that corner which I mentioned to Heliopolis, the original mound, the primordial mound at Heliopolis. From that same corner, each corner of a pyramid has a different meaning which can be measured, tested, and it leads to geometry, music, astronomy, and arithmetic. It is the quadrivium, as in 7 liberal arts, Hermes Trismegistus, Pythagoras, and of course Enoch, and the Great Year, and Heliopolis. Alright, 440 cubits, 440 cubits. Now, it just so happens that 440 kilometers, the distance from that same important corner of measure, as in meters, this corner, the northeast corner of the pyramid represents meters. Proved that earlier in regards to pi and phi and meters and the proportions, if you include the slight variations on each side. But anyway, 440 equals 273.403 miles. Miles is imperial, as in feet. It's at least 2,500 years old. Just forget whatever you read in regards to meters and feet, because the actual, it's not like I'm not saying that on my opinion basis. I'm saying on the actual physical evidence. It's just like it's cringe. It really is cringe in regards to meters and cubits and the official version of that. But anyway, this all links together: meters, seconds, cubits, and feet, and proportions of a Great Pyramid, 86,400 seconds per day, and all that stuff that goes on. So back to the socle. Well, that's exactly the same number as we see in New Jerusalem, or Jerusalem, 440 kilometers or cubits. 440 cubits is 660 feet. The furlong, come on, man, come on, come on. Okay, I know you watch it out there. I know, come on, write your books and send it to your editors, mate. But you're anyway. So 481.1 feet equals 27.33 Doric rods. Earlier, beginning with this series, I talked about the Salamis stone, which includes the Doric, the Ionic, Samian, as well as the English foot, or the allegedly modern English foot, going back at least to 2,500 years ago. Okay, 273. So the ascent from the north east corner of a pyramid to the dome of a rock, or where was formerly Solomon's Temple, and the foundation rock there is exactly 440 kilometers, or 273.40, etc. miles, which it turns out to be 481189.8513 yards. Okay, yards, feet, meters, cubits, imperial. So what happens there? If we just shift the decimal place, put it to feet. Now we have exactly 27.34033. Now, again, reminder, that's exactly the same number which links everything. Everything, it's all there. All right, now, there is one source, so I must say with a little asterisk, I haven't, but anyway, the stones above the king's chamber are said to be 5.5 meters. Now, 5.5 exactly would be 27.34, just in another scale. But anyway, 5.5 to 0.27, 27.3% of a chain. All right, so the angle of the pyramid. Now, each side is slightly different. The angle varies slightly. But, okay, 51.85396 in tan is 1.273, or 4 over pi. And the opposite is the inverse of that, pi over 4, which is an important feature, which is the area of a circle inside a square. Marvelous stuff, marvelous. Now this 273 is a constant. It's eventually going to be accepted. But anyway, 4 over pi is 1.273. 4 over pi minus 1, 0.273, etc. 4 minus pi over pi is 0.2. Oh, yes. Okay, so back to the size of the Earth, proportions of a Great Pyramid, which lead to geometry, astronomy, meters, cubits, feet, phi, pi, and all these other geometric mathematical constants. This image was going around a while ago. This is a CGI image. This is not true, but on December 3rd, 2012, Mercury, Venus, and Saturn aligned to the Great Pyramid. Now, it actually looked more like this. So if you're looking from the southeast of the pyramids, you would see Mercury, Venus, and Saturn. Notice that there is a slight dog leg there. Slight dog leg, okay. This happens every 2,737 years, and if you transpose those on top of the pyramids, it is higher correlation than the Orion stuff. Just forget the Orion stuff, because got to say, Buval poo-poos the Heliopolis alignment. He calls it an ugly little fact, and then uses a 2.2 meter variation, while his own variation is over 14 meters different. So, what's good for the goose is good for the gander, mate. But anyway, Mercury, Venus represents copper, Saturn represents lead, this ancient alchemical tradition. There's an Easter egg for you right there, buddies. Okay, now, this is based on best available evidence. Dark energy, dark matter, that's a 27.3%. Now, I've got to remind you, that's an asterisk there, because that's based on that. Now, the elemental composition of the sun, approximately 74% hydrogen, which would mean that elements heavier than hydrogen in the sun is 27.3%, give or take. Again, reminder, that's asterisk there, but let's keep going. Okay, area of a square circle, 27.3%. We showed that. Now, Ceres, which is the major protoplanet, or inside the asteroid belt, is 27.3% the size of the moon. The moon is 27.3% the size of the Earth. And it just so happens that in AU, 27, or astronomical units, which is the average distance from the sun to the Earth, the asteroid belt is at 2.73 AU. And of course, the moon at apogee, so from center to center, is 0.00273 AU. This is embedded and repeated in geometry. Circling the square, size of the Earth in regards to portions of Great Pyramid. Atmospheric tides, every 27.3 days there's a cycle of atmospheric pressure. Length of the day oscillates. There's a 13.66 or a 27.3 day cycle going on in here. Schumann resonance, 27.3 hertz, and a 27.3 day cycle of lightning at the equator. Can't make this up. Alright, so mentioned AU earlier, astronomical unit, which is connects so lovely to Bode's law, but that's the average distance from the Earth to the Sun. Just so happens that from Earth to Venus is 0.273 AU, and from Venus to Mercury is 0.273 AU. Sticking with that number, so density of the Sun, average 26.1, so within 1.3, but well, we have 273 to 1000 in regards to Earth to Moon. But we do have the rotation period, so we'll get to back rotation. So basically, what's the length of a day on the Sun? We'll come back to that. It's 27.3. Surface gravity is 1 to 273. Again, we've been very, very close. Again, above, at least 97%. Okay, now the temperature, the internal temperature of the Sun, being fusion, 273,000 Fahrenheit. Okay, temperature is another connection. Volume 1.273. Okay, 1,273,001. Well, the square root of, well, anyway, again, there it is. That's the Great Pyramid is half base 1 to 1.273. Density we've seen. Okay, let's close those up and go back. Okay, Schumann resonance. Keep AU and all this in mind. There was sunspots do change there, okay, but at 27.3% north or south of the equator, there seems to be a hot spot of sunspots, and at 27.3 degrees north or south of the equator, the average day on the Sun is 27.3 days, and that it takes 27.3 days for an orbit. At the equator, because the Sun's a gas giant, there are bands on the Sun and they rotate at different speeds. Basically at the equator it's 33 days. At 27.3 degrees it's 27.3 days. 273 days is the average gestation from the moment of conception to birth, and the menstrual cycle between 27.3 and 30 days. Okay, so there's a connection there. Now it just so happens that the temperature, surface temperature of the Earth at the equator in regards to the surface temperature of the Sun at the equator is 1 to 273. Fibonacci numbers, so 13 times 21 is 273. This is a nice connection in regards to the Fibonacci spiral and the phi squared area in relation to this particular geometry. Cosmic background radiation, what's the temperature? The space is not a perfect vacuum because it is 2.73 degrees Kelvin. This is one of these, okay, I won't go into, but space is not a vacuum. There are pressure gradients and there is a very small amount of pressure in space, and that's because at zero pressure you should have 0 degrees, but there is 2.73 Kelvin, and keeping 273 Kelvin in regards to Celsius as well. It's a sphenic number, 273, every second prime number, so 13 times 7 times 13 sphenic number, which is nice. So much of these connections to what's called number theory, recreational number theory, these numbers which you find in the architecture and the geometry, astronomy, arithmetic, music, and etc. Well, they just repeat consistently. They're very important. Because of this connection to 273, the speed of sound changes depending on the temperature. What's the equation for finding the temp? Well, it's 1 over 273. Avogadro's constant. Basically, how many atoms, molecules in a substance? Well, usually you'll see this number 6.022 times 10th to the 23rd, but in mole pounds, 2.73159. This has to do with alchemy, chemistry. Charles's law, the ideal expansion of gases, 1 over 273 per unit of temperature. This is a geometric, astronomical, architectural constant which is found across the ancient world. So the distance from the Earth to the Moon, I think I might anyway, but 0.00273 AU. Pause a moment. Okay, just as we mentioned earlier, there are other connects. So Mercury to Venus is 0.273 AU. Venus to Earth is 0.273 AU. 2.73 AU is the distance to Ceres, which is the asteroid belt, and Ceres, the largest object in the asteroid belt is 27.3% the size of the Earth, and the Moon is 27.3% the size of the Earth. Okay, well, no, these are oldest. Okay, so the Moon is 27.3% the size of the Earth, and the barycenter, the point at which the Moon orbits the Earth, is 27.3% below the surface. That just happens to be hovering around 1,080 miles, which is the radius of the Moon, or 1,000 miles, which is essentially 5,000 kilometers. Meters, feet, and cubits, and this geometry which is embedded in there. Gaussian blur. So this has to do, so this stuff, well, computing. So here's an example of the code used for Gaussian blur, 273. What is Gaussian blur? 273 is some of the values of a mark. Now 41 as well, there in the center. Gaussian blur is used to blur images. Blurring an image is not as simple as what it's at least in compute. Because how do you write a code to blur an image? Because it'll just turn into a grey soup. So if you're used to, got any Photoshop, you blur an image, it's actually quite complex to blur an image. But what's the beauty of Gaussian blur is that it can be used to de-blur images by any other means. This is like fractal geometry and the imagery used in fractal geometry, which also has nice links. Heliospheric current, 27.3 day rotation along the solar equator. Just so happens that Saturn is tilted at 27.3 degrees, and it is now the rings extend out, but on the visible part of the rings is 273,600 kilometers across. All right, sidereal month, 27.3 days for the Moon to orbit the Earth in relation to a fixed star. The Moon orbits on its axis every 27.3 days. That's why the man on the Moon always faces the Earth. And the average is 27 degrees because of elliptical orbit. The Moon will, during this 27.3 day orbit, 27.3 day axis on its orbit, on a rotation on its axis, will pass through 27.3 degrees. Like, man, come on. All right. Sidereal synodic. Now here's phi plus 1 equals phi squared. 1 divided by phi equals phi minus 1. This is one of the beauties of phi. Now, Euler's identity, e to the I pi plus 1 equals 0. Plus 1 to get to 0. E minus 1 feet equals the number of, E minus 1 equals the number of feet per Egyptian raw cubit. Well, full moons or synodic months is the square root of 153, 12.369, rounding it off very, very small amount, but 153, such an important number. Okay, as in, yeah, anyway, that's the number of full moons per year, 12.369. That's a synodic month. That's a rotation of the Moon around the Earth in relation to the Sun. But a sidereal month is an orbit of the Moon around the Earth in relation to a fixed star, which in case you need to bring precession into it to get super accurate. But anyway, 12.369 full moon synodic months per year, plus 1 equals 13.369, the number of sidereal months per year, which is a 27.3 day month. Just so happens absolute zero is minus 273.15 C, and 0 is 273.15 Kelvin. They just so happen to, at minus 40 degrees Celsius equals minus 40 degrees Fahrenheit, and that's 233.15 Kelvin. But yeah, okay, that's for the Fibonacci's anyway. Lots of stuff going on. Also in the vesica, in regards to what we have is a, what am I up to, 5 hours? Anyway, the pyramid and the numbers built into there and the proportions and the measurements, feet, meters, and cubits. Everything that is represented in proportion is represented in measurements, feet, meters, and cubits. Then we can eventually going to bring in Mohenjo-Daro. Okay, the ancient Egyptian copper deben was 27.3 grams in Mohenjo-Daro, and the Indus civilization there. Weight scale was also 27.3 gram. The Roman ounce, 27.3 gram in Rome. The Greek ounce, 27.3 gram. And it's still being used, carries on. So weights and measures, this has been embedded in this particular system. and it really is in so many levels. And the problem is that this raises questions which would challenge the narrative that we've got going on here. Also would challenge the alternative narrative, I must say, because but anyway, sun, earth, moon, stars, planets, geometry, chemistry are linked in a beautiful. Now let's say this is all coincidence. Okay, let's say that this is all at the very least. By learning these few numbers, these few proportions, which are built into not just the pyramids but ancient structures such as Parthenon, stone circles, other temples, including places such as the US Capitol building, US Supreme Court, the White House, monuments all across Washington, here in Australia, Canberra or Brasilia, capital of Brazil, or Astana, the newest of these new Jerusalem cities. Certain architects, certain sculptors, always repeating these numbers, these proportions, which are so linked to sun, earth, moon, stars, so linked to the Great Pyramid, for instance, and yeah, geometry and Enochian connections, Hermetic connections, Pythagorean connections, and especially with weights and measures, because we can weigh, we can measure, we can be certain about this. Now, I've had a few little comment battles where if you take one piece of this, you can argue yourself out of having to accept it. But if you go through the larger evidence and then you keep linking them up, for instance, to 86,400 seconds per day. Okay, let's pause a moment. Okay, now I took screenshots. Maybe if you do a reverse image search, you might be able to find the original. I should have spent that, but anyway, we'll get to that because there's so much more in regards to this and how all of this connects to other aspects of it. It's measurable, tangible, it's there. But for instance, well, there's a typo there because it should be 2732, but 4 minus pi divided by okay, but the reciprocal of that 3 that's okay. Ratio of moon to diameters of the earth, ratio of earth to diameters of the moon. Okay, so 366, number of full rotations in one sidereal year. There are different ways of measuring the day. There are slightly different ways of measuring the year. Probably most people are used to the 365.24 days per year. It varies slightly depending on the method. Okay, 109. Yeah, okay, I'll just leave that with you for the moment. Where's the next one? Okay. And again, pause the number because I've got more to come in. Yeah, okay, anyway. Now, weights and measures. So if you have a the poids system, 1 gram, 273.34 grams, which converts that's the ounce that we're familiar with, a food ounce, not to be confused with a troy ounce, which is used to measure gold and silver. All right, now, what's the height of the Georgia Guidestones? 27334 Doric chain. Tony Rosenthal and his cubes, which include 29.53, 108, etc. Well, they all just happen to convert these 273 proportions as well. It's also built into Sydney Harbour Bridge. So, for instance, from the top, now Egyptian Royal Miles, let's say this is a bit out there. Okay, so just forget that one for the moment. But from the top to the deck is, and then from the deck to the water, so that from the top to the deck would be 1.73, therefore, and from the deck to the water would be 1 in proportion. This is a vest, so it's 2.73 in proportion in regard. So again, this is modern structures, ancient structures, so anything connected to the esoteric, just embedded in there. In other video, okay, I could go on for hours, just go site after site, Suez Canal, all these other places always have this always. This is a requisite of this esoteric architecture, hidden in plain sight. And okay, so weights and measures. People such as Gunther, which connects to New Jerusalem, the furlong, and embed Enoch. Okay, and yeah, it's all there. And these numbers, these measures are all linked in there. Measure, and the truth shall set you free. Have a good one.